The basic evil is invariably a lack of genuine warmth and affection. That is, well, that is an incredibly heavy way to start a morning. It's almost biblical, isn't it? The basic evil.
It really does sound biblical, doesn't it? But what's fascinating is that it's actually a clinical statement. It's a quote that just cuts right to the bone of the human experience.
Yeah.
It summarizes the entire life's work of the woman we're going to be talking about today. And it suggests that the root of our deepest, our most twisted psychological struggles isn't necessarily some big, dramatic Hollywood-style trauma.
Right, it's not the car crash or the big event.
Exactly. It's not always the explosion. Sometimes it's the silence. It's something colder, quieter, and unfortunately much more common.
We are doing a deep dive today into the work of Karen Horney. Now, before we go any further, I have to be the one to ask this. I'm looking at the spelling here. Horney. I feel like if I say it the way it looks, I'm going to get immediately demonetized.
You might, and look, the jokes, they really do write themselves. But in the context of her German heritage and, the way her name was anglicized when she came to the United States, the accepted pronunciation is Horney.
Karen Horney. Okay. Got it. She was a giant in psychoanalysis, but I feel like she's often the neglected second-born of the field, if you will.
That's a great way to put it, and very fitting.
Everyone talks about Freud, everyone talks about Jung. Horney feels a bit like the indie band that the cool kids know about, but she never quite got the stadium tour. But her mission, what she was trying to solve, it feels insanely modern to me. She was looking at how a lack of love in childhood creates a lifetime of anxiety, and specifically the very distinct sort of rigid ways we try to cope with that anxiety.
Precisely. And what makes Horney so compelling, I think, is that she didn't just observe this in her patients from some detached clinical distance. She lived it. Her theory is, in so many ways, a disguised autobiography.
So it's personal.
Deeply personal. She was a rebel, a defector from the orthodox Freudian school, and she fundamentally changed how we look at personality. She took the focus off the body and put it squarely on the heart. Or, I guess, the lack thereof.
So let's set the stage here. To really get Horney, we have to understand the giant shadow she was trying to step out of. She started her career as a Freudian, right?
Oh, absolutely. She was trained in the official psychoanalytic doctrine in Berlin. She was a card-carrying member of the club, so to speak.
So she knew the rules.
She knew the rules inside and out. But you have to remember what those rules were. Freud's view of humanity was, at its core, biological. He believed personality was determined by these innate forces: sex, aggression, your anatomy. Biology is destiny, as the famous phrase goes.
Which feels, a little reductive. It's like I'm just a meat sack driven by hormones and the shape of my body parts.
Well, that was pretty much the orthodox view at the time. Horney looked at this whole framework and just said, hold on a second. She argued that personality isn't just about biology, it's about social and cultural forces. It's about the relationships we have, especially with our parents.
So the nurture part of the equation.
A huge part of it. She shifted the focus from our internal plumbing, you could say, to the external environment. She argued that people are motivated not primarily by sexual drives, but by two fundamental needs: the need for safety and the need for love.
That feels like a massive pivot. A huge change in perspective. Instead of being driven by some dark, internal, animalistic urge to destroy or procreate, we're actually driven by this desperate, almost childlike need to just feel safe in the world.
It creates a completely different picture of human nature, doesn't it? Freud was, at the end of the day, a pessimist. He kind of thought we were doomed by our instincts.
Right.
Horney was ultimately an optimist. She believed we could change precisely because we are reacting to our environment. Change the environment or our reaction to it, and you can change the person.
And to understand why she felt so strongly about this need for love and safety, we really have to look at her childhood. Because honestly, if you wrote her childhood as a screenplay, a producer would probably tell you it's a bit too on the nose for a villain origin story.
Yeah.
Except here, it's a theorist origin story.
It's the perfect setup. It explains everything.
It really does feel like a textbook case. So let's unpack her history. Karen Danielson, that was her maiden name, was born near Hamburg, Germany in 1885. And from the very beginning, she felt like an outsider in her own family.
She explicitly called herself a neglected second-born. It's a label she gave herself. She had an older brother. His name was Bernd. And by all accounts, Bernd was the golden child.
The favorite.
Absolutely the favorite. He was attractive, he was charming, and crucially, he was the firstborn son. Karen, on the other hand, felt that she was smarter and more vivacious, but she was constantly battling this deep-seated feeling that her parents just No, that they preferred him, and they weren't exactly subtle about it.
No, not at all. And there's this one specific anecdote in the research that I think perfectly captures this feeling. It wasn't just that she was jealous of the attention he got. She was jealous of his actual status as a male in that society.
Yes.
She wrote in her diary that she envied Dant because, and this is a direct quote, he could stand near a tree and pee.
It's such a humorous image, isn't it? But if you pause for a second and really think about what that actually represents to a child...
It's not about the urination itself.
No, of course not. It's about agency. It's about freedom. It's about the freedom to interact with the world on your own terms without restriction. To her, it represented the incredible superiority that society, and more importantly, her parents, accorded to boys.
So she saw maleness as freedom and femaleness as, what, a cage?
A restriction? Absolutely. And her parents didn't do anything to dispel that notion. Let's talk about the father for a minute, because he sounds intense. That's putting it mildly. He was a ship's captain, a Norwegian man. He was deeply religious, but also domineering and morose, just a heavy presence. She wrote about his fierce eyes that he would use to intimidate her.
Wow.
He was often away at sea, which you might think would be a relief for the family, but when he was home, the whole house was just filled with this suffocating tension. He would make these disparaging comments about Karen's appearance, about her intelligence. He actually nicknamed her Karen the Introverted, which is just a terrible label for a parent to slap on a child.
Ouch. That's brutal. So you have this looming, critical, judgmental figure. And the mother, was she the safe harbor in all this?
Not exactly. The mother was, in terms of personality, the complete opposite of the father. She was much younger, she was attractive, spirited, a free thinker. But, and this is the kicker, she openly confessed to Karen that she didn't marry the father for love.
Wait, she told her child that?
She did.
She said, I married your dad because I was scared of being alone. That is a heavy, heavy burden to place on a kid.
It's devastating. What it basically tells the child is, this family, this entire structure you live in is a sham. It's built on fear, not love. So Karen felt caught in the middle of this loveless alliance. She started to doubt her parents even wanted her.
Which is the core fear.
It's the core fear. She wrote in her diary when she was only 16, "Why is everything beautiful on earth given to me, only not the highest thing, not love?"
That's just heartbreaking.
It is. And for a while, she tried to fix it. Until she was about 8 or 9, she was the model child. She was clingy, compliant, completely obedient. She was running a strategy.
A good girl strategy.
The good girl strategy. If I am good enough, if I'm perfect, then maybe, just maybe, they will love me.
But it didn't work.
No. Being the good girl completely failed to secure the love she needed. And this is where we see the first major pivot in her life, one that would come to define her entire theory later on. When compliance failed, she completely flipped the script.
How so?
She became ambitious and rebellious. She made a conscious, intellectual decision. She said, if I couldn't be beautiful, I decided I would be smart.
If I couldn't be beautiful, I decided I would be smart. Wow. That feels so transactional. It's like she's bartering with the universe. Okay, you won't give me love, so I'll trade you. I will trade achievement for security.
Precisely. And I want you to hold on to that thought, because that is the absolute seed of her entire theory of neurosis. It's the root of seeking power and success, not for the joy of it, not for passion, but as a defense mechanism, a shield.
So it's not about what you're building, it's about what you're protecting yourself from.
Exactly. And she was successful. She fought her way into medical school in 1906, which was almost unheard of for a woman at the time. She became incredibly successful professionally, but that underlying hole, that lack of genuine warmth and affection, it never really went away.
And you can see that playing out in her romantic life too, right? She seemed to be constantly searching for that missing love, that validation in other people.
It was a lifelong pattern, a constant search. She married a man named Oscar Horney, a businessman, but the marriage was deeply unhappy. She suffered from severe depression, crying spells. She even had suicidal thoughts. She described feeling oppressed by him.
So she escaped one suffocating household just to build another one.
In a way, yes. And to cope, she engaged in numerous affairs. She was always looking for a savior, for that one person who could finally fill that void. She had relationships with the famous psychoanalyst Erich Fromm, with younger men, even with some of her students.
There's that one story that is just both hilarious and incredibly heartbreaking, where she was apparently trying to decide between marrying a young man or getting a Cocker Spaniel.
And she chose the dog.
She chose the dog. And I mean, look, I get it. Dogs provide unconditional love, which is exactly what she was missing. But it really, really highlights the dysfunction. It's like she just gave up on humans being able to fill that void for her.
It does. A biographer noted that her entire theory is essentially a way for her to make sense of her own struggle. She was trying to answer her own questions. Why am I so anxious? Why do I keep falling into these same painful patterns? And she realized that her drive for success, her need for men, her rebellion, it was all a reaction to that initial lack of safety she felt as a child.
So let's bridge this now. Let's connect her life to the theory itself. She takes this messy, painful personal experience and synthesizes it into a formal structure. And it all starts with this concept she called the childhood need for safety.
Right. Horney's premise is that childhood is dominated by this safety need. This is the need for security and freedom from fear. And she argues, and this is a really important point, that it is not necessarily the big traumas, a beating or an early sexual experience that ruin a child. A child can actually survive those things amazingly if they feel fundamentally loved and wanted.
That's a critical distinction. It's not the event itself. It's the context of the relationship around the event.
Exactly. The real lasting damage is done when parents undermine a child's security. And they can do this in very subtle ways. Horney called this whole category of parental failure the basic evil.
The basic evil.
Yes. It's things like an obvious preference for a sibling, like with Burnt. It's unfair punishment, ridicule, humiliation, or just erratic behavior. If a parent is loving one minute and then cold and dismissive the next, that unpredictability completely destroys a child's sense of a safe, predictable world.
Okay, so when a child's safety is undermined by this basic evil, what happens next? They don't just, shrug it off. They get angry.
They feel hostility. The child knows on some deep intuitive level that they are being treated unfairly. But, and this is the absolute crucial part of the mechanism, the child cannot express that hostility. They have to repress it.
Why, though? I mean, if I'm a kid and you're being mean to me, my first instinct is to scream or maybe throw a toy. Why do they learn to bottle it up?
Horney identified 4 specific and, I think, fascinatingly logical reasons for this. The first one is helplessness. The child thinks on a very basic level, I have to repress my hostility because I need you. They are completely dependent on the parents for food, shelter, survival. They literally cannot afford to burn that bridge.
Okay, that's pure survival instinct. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, even if that hand is sometimes cold.
Exactly. The second reason is fear. The child thinks, I must repress my hostility because I'm afraid of you. If the parent is intimidating, like Horney's father with his fierce eyes, the child learns very quickly that expressing anger leads to danger, to punishment.
Makes sense. Keep your head down to stay safe. What's the third?
The third is love, which is a bit paradoxical and really tragic. The child clings to whatever scraps of affection they can get. They repress their anger because they are terrified of losing even the false or the substitute demonstrations of love that the parents might offer.
Wait, so the thinking is, if I get angry at you, you won't even pretend to like me anymore.
That's it. They're in a constant state of bargaining. I will swallow my anger if you will just smile at me once in a while. It's desperate.
And the fourth reason?
The fourth is guilt. In many cultures, children are taught that it is sinful or wicked to resent their parents. You're supposed to honor them. So the child feels, I am a bad person for even feeling this way. And they bury the feeling deep down to avoid that sense of shame.
So you have all this repressed hostility, all this anger just bubbling under the surface. It hasn't gone away. It's just hidden. It's like toxic waste that's been buried in the backyard. What does that eventually turn into?
It transforms. It metabolizes into what Horney called basic anxiety. This is the absolute cornerstone of her theory. She defined it as an insidiously increasing, all-pervading feeling of being lonely and helpless in a hostile world.
Lonely and helpless in a hostile world. I mean, that is a terrifying worldview to carry around in your head every single day.
It's an awful way to live. Imagine feeling small, insignificant, deserted, and endangered all the time. It's not about a specific fear, like you're afraid of a spider or you're afraid of heights. It's the texture of life itself. It's the fundamental feeling that the world is out to abuse, cheat, attack, or humiliate you. You're just walking through life waiting for the other shoe to drop.
So if you are walking around with this level of basic anxiety, you can't just function normally. You'd be a complete nervous wreck. You have to do something to stop the pain. You need a shield, a strategy.
A strategy is the perfect word for it. Horney identified 4 primary self-protective mechanisms. Now, it's really important to note here, the goal of these mechanisms is not to be happy. It's not to grow or to thrive. The goal is simply to be safe. We are in pure damage control mode.
Okay, so let's run through them. What's the first one?
The first mechanism is securing affection. The internal logic here is very simple. If you love me, you will not hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
So the person tries to do anything to get that affection. They might try to bribe others or threaten them or just become overly pleasing.
So this is the people pleaser on steroids.
Yes, exactly. The second is being submissive. The logic here is, if I give in, I will not be hurt. This person learns to repress all of their personal desires. They avoid conflict at all costs. They make themselves small so that they don't become a target.
Okay, the third.
Attaining power. This is the flip side of submission. The logic is, if I have power, no one can harm me. Here, the person uses superiority as their shield. If I'm the boss, if I'm the smartest person in the room, if I'm the richest, then you can't touch me. You can't hurt me.
And the last one.
The last one is withdrawing. This is about achieving a kind of psychological independence. The logic is, if I don't need anyone, I can't be hurt. So they become aloof, they detach, they numb their own needs so they don't have to rely on anyone else who might let them down.
I feel like I can see bits of myself or, people I know in all of these. But Horney took these 4 basic mechanisms and refined them, right? This leads us to the absolute core of her theory, the famous neurotic trends. But before she got to the 3 big trends, she actually broke it down even further, didn't she?
She did, and this is a part of her work that's often skipped over, but I think it's vital. She initially identified 10 neurotic needs. These are the very specific compulsions that drive our behavior when we're operating from a place of anxiety. And I want to list them because they are so relatable it almost hurts.
Okay, lay them on me.
All right. She identified the need for affection and approval, the need for a dominant partner to take over one's life, and the need to restrict one's life within narrow borders.
Wait, narrow borders? What does that mean?
It means being undemanding, asking for nothing, making yourself as small and invisible as possible to avoid trouble. Then there was the need for power, the need to exploit others, the need for social recognition or prestige, the need for personal admiration.
So far, that just sounds like a corporate job description.
Lags.
It really does. Then we have the need for personal achievement, the need for self-sufficiency and independence, and finally, the need for perfection and unassailability.
Okay, that is a long laundry list of human behaviors. But are these inherently bad? I mean, doesn't everyone want affection sometimes? Doesn't everyone want a little bit of power or privacy?
That is the million-dollar question. And Horney's answer is what separates health from neurosis. In a healthy person, these are wants, not needs. They are flexible. Sometimes you move toward people when you need support. Sometimes you move against them when you need to stand your ground. Sometimes you move away when you need solitude.
You can switch between strategies depending on the situation.
Exactly. The problem arises when you are neurotic. For the neurotic person, these needs become trends, and those trends are compulsive, indiscriminate, and rigid. You have to act this way all the time, regardless of whether it's appropriate. It's not a choice anymore, it's a compulsion. Right, so she took these 10 specific needs and realized they clustered together. They grouped into 3 main directions of movement, 3 primary ways of moving through the world. Let's dive deep into these, because this is really the personality type part of her theory. The first is moving toward people.
Horney called this the compliant personality. This type clusters the needs for affection, for approval, and for a dominant partner.
So these are the nice people, the people pleasers.
Well, they seem nice, and they often genuinely believe that they are nice, but the behavior is often a kind of manipulative niceness. On the surface, they appear considerate, appreciative, unselfish, but the internal logic, the subconscious driver is, look at me. I am so weak and helpless that you must protect and love me.
So it's a transaction. It's a deal. I will be your doormat if you promise to take care of me.
It's exactly that. The strategy is poor little old me. But here is the dark secret of the compliant personality. They repress a profound amount of defiance and vindictiveness. They are actually furious deep down.
Furious about what?
They're thinking, on some level, I am sacrificing myself for you, so you owe me. And when you don't pay up, when you don't love them back enough or protect them perfectly, that repressed rage starts to leak out. It can be passive-aggressive. It can be guilt-tripping.
That is devastatingly accurate for some relationships I've seen in my life. It's a covert contract. The other person says, I didn't ask you to do all that for me, but they feel like you owe them anyway.
You've broken a contract you never knew you signed.
Wow. Okay, what about the complete opposite? Trend 2, moving against people. The aggressive personality.
This type clusters the needs for power, exploitation, prestige, and achievement. For this person, their fundamental worldview is life is a jungle. They believe everyone is hostile and only the fittest survive, so they decide they're going to be the fittest.
These are the dominators,
Yeah.
the critics,
Right.
the people who always need to win the argument no matter how small.
Yes. Their primary motivation is survival and security through superiority. They have to excel. They must receive recognition. If they aren't the best, they don't feel safe. It's a compulsive drive to be on top.
How do they view something like work? Is it about passion for the craft?
Rarely. To the aggressive type, work is almost always a means to an end. It's not about enjoying the process. It's about the power and prestige that success brings. They need to prove constantly that they are better than you. And what's really interesting is that Horney points out that underneath this tough, armored exterior, they have the exact same insecurity and anxiety as the compliant type.
Really? But they seem so confident, so sure of themselves.
It's a mask. It's a performance. They just deal with the underlying anxiety in a completely different way. They never display a fear of rejection. Instead, they reject you before you have a chance to reject them.
The preemptive strike.
It's a total preemptive strike. I'll fire you before you can quit. I'll break up with you before you can hurt me. I'll criticize your work before you can criticize mine.
That sounds absolutely exhausting.
It is. It's a constant state of war, both with the world and with yourself.
Okay, and that brings us to the third trend, moving away from people. The detached personality.
This type clusters the needs for self-sufficiency, perfection, and those narrow limits we talked about. These are the people who are driven by a deep, compulsive need for emotional distance. Their core logic is, if I don't need anyone, I can't be hurt by anyone.
This goes way beyond just being an introvert, doesn't it? This isn't just about needing to recharge your batteries after a party.
No, this is existential. It's a fundamental life stance. They have a desperate desire for privacy. Horney noted they might even want to listen to music alone because sharing that experience feels like an intrusion, a demand. They are incredibly sensitive to any form of coercion or obligation.
There was a detail in the source material about neckties that I found hilarious, but also kind of sad and revealing.
Yes. Horney noted that the detached personality can feel physically constricted by things like timetables, marriage vows, or even the pressure of a necktie or a tight belt. To them, it all feels like a shackle, a restriction on their freedom. They want to be completely unencumbered by anyone or anything.
If she were writing today, she would 100% be talking about ghosting, wouldn't she?
Oh, absolutely. The detached personality is the king or queen of ghosting. They don't want the messiness of a confrontation. They just fade away, turning off read receipts, ignoring texts for days. It's all a way to maintain that buffer zone, to send the message, don't expect anything from me.
And like the aggressive type, they also feel a sense of superiority, but it manifests in a different way.
Right. The aggressive person has to fight to prove they are superior. The detached person believes their greatness should just be recognized automatically without them having to struggle for it. They feel unique, but they don't want to get their hands dirty proving it. They suppress feelings of both love and hate. To love is to need someone, and to hate is to care about what someone does. They want neither. They want to be a rock, an island.
So we have these three trends: moving toward, moving against, and moving away. And it's important to remember, Horney lived all of these herself at different points. He was the compliant child, the aggressive student, the detached observer. But what happens to the other two trends when you compulsively pick one? If I'm a moving against type, for instance, does my need for affection and approval just vanish into thin air?
No, and that is the absolute tragedy of neurosis. The other trends are still there deep down, but they have to be repressed. This creates what Horney defined as the core conflict, the basic incompatibility of these three trends living inside one person. If you are a compliant person who desperately needs love, but you also have a repressed, aggressive streak that wants to dominate and control, those two fundamental drives are going to tear you apart internally.
It's a civil war inside your own psyche.
Exactly. The neurotic person is ruled by one dominant trend and has to spend a huge amount of psychic energy shoving the other two down into the basement. And when a repressed trend tries to surface, let's say a submissive, compliant person suddenly feels a powerful urge to scream at their boss, it causes severe, overwhelming anxiety. They feel like they're losing control of themselves.
This leads us to another one of Horney's brilliant concepts, which is the mask we wear to keep this whole fragile system from collapsing. The idealized self-image.
Right. We all have a self-image. In a healthy person, it's based on a realistic assessment of our abilities and our flaws. You know, I'm good at math, I'm kind of bad at tennis, I'm a generally kind person, but I can be impatient. It's flexible, it can handle feedback.
It's grounded in reality.
Yes. But the neurotic person cannot accept reality because their inner reality is full of unbearable conflict. So they create an illusion. They build an idealized self-image of absolute perfection to try and unify their split personality.
So the compliant person constructs an image of themselves, telling themselves, I am a saint. I am the most generous, loving, selfless person who has ever lived.
And the aggressive person tells themselves, I am the strongest, smartest, most invincible warrior. And the detached person sees themselves as perfectly self-sufficient and wise. This idealized image becomes their reality. They stop seeing who they actually are and only see this glorious, perfect person they believe they are, or should be.
But because it's impossible to live up to that, it leads to what Horney famously called the tyranny of the shoulds.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this phrase. The tyranny of the shoulds. It sounds like a medieval torture device. Unpack this for us.
It feels like one. The tyranny of the shoulds is what happens when the neurotic tries to force their real, flawed self to match this impossible ideal. They're constantly telling themselves, I should be the perfect employee. I should never feel tired. I should be the most patient parent. I should always be courageous and never feel fear.
It's an endless, punishing list of demands you place on yourself.
It is. And the inevitable result is self-hatred. Because you are human, you will, by definition, fail to be perfect. You will get tired. You will lose your temper with your kids. You will feel fear. And when you fail, the neurotic voice inside doesn't say, oh, well, you're human, try again tomorrow. It says, you are worthless. You are a failure. They deny their true self in favor of this fake God they've created in their mind.
Horney had a great and pretty terrifying analogy for this neurotic self-image. She said it's like a house filled with dynamite.
Yes. It might look impressive on the outside, maybe even majestic and perfect, but it is structurally unsound and ready to self-destruct at the slightest crack. One piece of criticism from your boss, one failure on a project, and the whole thing just blows up into self-loathing.
And when that pressure gets too high, when we can't handle the internal self-hatred, Horney says we use another defense mechanism called externalization.
Right. This is when we take our inner conflict and project it onto the outside world. It's a way of getting it out of our own heads.
Can you give me a real-world example of that?
Yeah.
Because projection can feel a little bit abstract sometimes.
Okay, think about road rage. It's a perfect example. Imagine you are running late for an important meeting. You are angry at yourself because you should have left earlier. That's the tyranny of the shoulds kicking in. You feel stupid and irresponsible. But that feeling is too painful to sit with. So what do?
You scream at the guy driving too slow in front of you.
Exactly. Look at this idiot. He's making me late. Suddenly, the problem isn't your own failing. You're not late because you overslept. You're late because the world is full of incompetent drivers who are actively conspiring to ruin your day.
I see. So you externalize the self-hatred and you turn it into hatred of others. It's a way to avoid facing the rot inside.
It protects the idealized self-image from cracking. It's always easier to fight a ghost outside than it is to fight the demon inside your own house.
Precisely. Wow. Okay, I want to shift gears a bit here because we really need to address the elephant in the room. We can't do a deep dive on Horney without talking about her famous battle with the man himself, Sigmund Freud. We touched on it earlier, but this is where it gets really spicy. This wasn't just a polite academic disagreement. It was a fundamental clash over the very nature of feminine psychology.
This was a major battleground, and she was incredibly brave. You have to understand the context. In 1922, Karen Horney was the first woman ever to present a paper on feminine psychology at an official psychoanalytic congress. And guess who was chairing the meeting?
Freud himself.
The man himself. Talk about walking into the lion's den. She stands up in a room full of men, led by the godfather of psychology, and basically says, with all due respect, you guys have gotten this completely wrong.
That takes guts. So what was Freud's view that she was arguing against?
Freud's view was strictly biological and, frankly, deeply misogynistic by any modern standard. He believed that women's psychology was defined by penis envy. He thought women felt like castrated men, that they had inferior superegos or weaker morals, and that they were inherently jealous of the male anatomy. He literally believed that girls felt inferior because they looked at their own bodies and felt that something essential was missing.
And Horney wasn't having any of it. But she didn't just say, that's offensive. She did something much more clever. She flipped the entire argument on its head.
She did. She introduced the brilliant and provocative concept of womb envy.
Which, I admit, sounds a little bit like a joke comeback on the playground, but she was dead serious.
She was deadly serious. She argued that men are actually, on a deep unconscious level, envious of women's capacity for pregnancy and childbirth. Women can create new life from within their own bodies. Men cannot. Horney suggested that this biological inability to create life drives men to overcompensate in the external world.
So building skyscrapers, conquering nations, writing epic symphonies, this is all just men trying to make up for the fact that they can't have babies.
In Horney's view, yes, it's a significant part of the drive. She argued that men tend to belittle women and seek hyperachievement in their work because they play such a comparatively small biological role in the act of creation. They need to prove their worth in other ways. They create laws, art, and monuments as their pseudo-creations.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't that just reverse sexism? Oh, you guys are just jealous of our uteruses? It feels like she's fighting fire with fire.
It definitely has that flavor, but I think she used it to make a much broader and more important point. She wasn't really saying biology is destiny for men either. She was showing how ridiculous Freud's biological determinism was by holding up a mirror to it. Her real pivot was to cultural context. She argued that if women do feel inferior, it's not because of their bodies, it's because of culture.
Right. If society spends thousands of years telling you that you're a second class, eventually you start to believe it.
She used the example of ancient Chinese philosophy, the concept of yin and yang. Yin is the female principle, and it's associated with being dark, passive, and weak. Yang is the male principle, associated with being vital, active, and strong.
So the very cosmology of the culture puts women in the weak box from the start.
Exactly. Horney's point was that if you grow up in a culture that tells you from birth that you are the dark, weak element, of course you're going to internalize feelings of inferiority. It's not your body telling you that, it's your entire society. She was one of the first psychoanalytic thinkers to really hammer home that psychology is culturally determined, not biologically fixed.
She also reinterpreted the Oedipus complex, which is Freud's most famous and, let's be honest, his creepiest idea.
She completely took the sex out of it. Freud famously said the young boy wants to sleep with his mother and kill his father. Horney looked at that and said, no, that's absurd. What looks like passionate clinging to one parent and jealousy of the other isn't sexual at all. It's a reaction to anxiety.
It goes right back to her core concept of safety.
Exactly. It's a conflict between the child's dependence on the parents and their repressed hostility toward them for undermining their security. The child clings to the mother not because he has an incestuous desire for her, but because he is terrified and she is his shield against a hostile world. It's about safety, not sex.
Which, again, feels so much more relatable and intuitive to the actual human experience of being a child. So Horney laid out this incredible detailed framework. She challenged Freud, she redefined anxiety, she mapped out our neurotic behaviors. But did it hold up over time? We're talking about theories from the 1930s and 40s. What does modern research actually say about her ideas?
It holds up surprisingly well. Researchers have looked at her neurotic trends and found some really strong correlations in modern studies. For example, a team of researchers named Caspi, Elder, and Bem did a famous longitudinal study starting in the late 80s. They tracked ill-tempered children kids who perfectly fit the moving against profile.
And what happened to them when they grew up? Did they all become CEOs?
Some might have, but generally the outcome wasn't great. They became ill-tempered adults. As a group, they had higher rates of divorce and something called downward occupational mobility. They couldn't hold on to jobs or relationships because they were just constantly fighting the world.
And what about the shy kids, the little moving away types?
This is where it gets really interesting and where culture comes in again, proving Horney right. Shy boys, those who fit the moving away pattern, tended to have issues later in life. They had marital and job instability. But the shy girls, by and large, they did fine.
Because society accepts, or at least accepted at the time, a quiet, withdrawn woman much more readily than a withdrawn, unassertive man.
Exactly. It validates Horney's core point that culture determines how these personality traits play out. If the culture rewards your neurosis, you might look successful. If it punishes it, you look sick.
There's also some fascinating research on hypercompetitiveness, which aligns almost perfectly with Horney's idea of neurotic competitiveness.
Yes. Researchers distinguish between two different types of competitiveness. Competing to win, which is about domination and proving you're better than others, versus competing to excel, which is about personal growth and beating your own previous best.
And Horney's neurotic type is competing to win.
Absolutely. And modern research shows that this trait is strongly associated with narcissism, with low self-esteem, and with lower overall psychological health. Whereas competing to excel, just trying to be a better version of yourself, is very healthy.
It's good to know the data backs it up. It shows Horney wasn't just, theorizing in a vacuum. She was describing a reality that we can actually measure.
She absolutely was.
We are coming toward the end of our deep dive here, and I want to touch on the so what of it all. Freud was, as we said, a pessimist. He basically thought we were doomed to be miserable because of our primal instincts. But Horney had a very different take on our potential for change.
Horney was ultimately an optimist. She believed deeply in what she called self-realization. She used this beautiful analogy of an acorn. An acorn, she said, has an innate potential to grow into a mighty oak tree. It will do so naturally unless something blocks it, like a lack of water or not enough sunlight or a rock is in its way.
So we are wired to grow, to become our best selves.
Yes, we have an innate potential to develop our true, authentic selves. We are not doomed by our biology or even by our childhoods. She believed fervently that we can change. Adult experiences matter. We can learn to dismantle that house of dynamite and build something solid and real in its place.
That is a really hopeful message. It means we aren't just the sum of our traumas.
We aren't. We are works in progress. Always.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on, something that really stuck with me from Horney's concept of the tyranny of the shoulds.
Go for it.
I want you to just think about your day-to-day. Think about the to-do list in your head, the things you're planning on doing. How much of your daily behavior is driven by what you genuinely want to do? What brings you joy or fulfills your real self? Versus what that invisible, impossible, idealized version of yourself thinks you should do. I should be working harder. I should be thinner. I should be happier.
It's a very powerful audit to perform on your own mind.
And the really scary question that follows from that is, if you actually stopped listening to all the shoulds, who would you be?
That is the question of a lifetime, isn't it?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mind and work of Karen Horney. We'll see you next time.